Hello, and welcome to Sleepy Starlight Channel. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Maybe your day was long, or maybe you're simply looking for a calm voice to help you unwind and drift into sleep. Tonight, we'll take a gentle journey where science becomes a story and curiosity leads us softly into dreams. In the beginning, there was only change. The young Earth spun faster than, wrapped in storms of fire and lightning, its surface an ocean of molten stone. The air was thick with vapor, with sulfur and iron, with the heavy breath of a world still forming. Volcanoes bled into the sky. Asteroids fell like punctuation marks in a sentence written by gravity. There were no forests yet, no waves in the familiar sense, no breeze that could cool skin, for there was no skin to feel it. And yet, even then, something was waiting. Not a creature, not a plan, but a possibility, the instinct to endure. When the rains came, and they came for millions of years, they fell upon rock and fire, carving valleys that had no names. Steam rose from the cracks, and the planet began to cool. The oceans formed not from peace, but from exhaustion. They were dark, restless, full of chemicals and minerals, churning with energy from the deep. Lightning split the clouds, striking the surface again and again, sparking reactions that stitched together the first fragile threads of complexity. In that endless chemical dance, life began its experiment. It started small, so small that it could not be seen, even if there had been eyes to see. Microscopic clusters of molecules learned to arrange themselves, to copy their own shapes, to protect their fragile patterns from the chaos around them. Each mistake, each imperfection in replication became a test, a chance to change. The ones that could adjust, that could bend rather than break, survived. The rest dissolved back into the sea. And so resilience was born, not as strength, but as flexibility. The first cells were not conquerors. They were listeners. They absorbed the language of their surroundings, temperature, salinity, light, and they answered with chemistry. When the heat grew unbearable, they learned to retreat into rock. When the water turned acidic, they altered their membranes. When oxygen, once a poison, flooded the world, they learned to breathe it. Every catastrophe became a lesson. Every obstacle, a form of dialogue between the world and the living. Adaptation was not invention, it was conversation. Imagine those early oceans, black under a red sky. Hydrothermal vents along the seafloor exhaled minerals and warmth, glowing like veins of light in the dark. Around them, life clustered. Bacteria formed colonies, exchanging energy and information, passing it from one generation to the next. They did not compete, they shared, and in that sharing they built the foundation for everything that would follow. Cooperation was the first law of survival. As the eons passed, the Earth changed again. Continents formed, collided, and broke apart. The air grew clear enough for light to reach the surface, and life, drawn by curiosity, began to rise toward it. Some cells learned to capture that light, to turn sunlight into energy. It was a quiet revolution, photosynthesis, the act of eating the sun without harm. With it, the world changed color, the sky filled with oxygen, and the oceans shimmered blue for the first time. It was the first great act of transformation, and it came not from strength, but from gentleness, from the simple act of learning how to live within the flow instead of against it. But adaptation has never been without cost. The oxygen that made the skies beautiful also poisoned many of the beings that had thrived before. Entire lineages vanished, suffocated by the very element that would later sustain all animals. And yet, this was not a failure. It was a refinement. Life shed what could not bend and preserved what could. In this way, extinction and resilience became two sides of the same rhythm. The planet learned balance through loss. Resilience is not about avoiding change. It is about allowing it to pass through you without dissolving your essence. The first living things understood this, not through reason, but through existence. They adapted by yielding, not resisting. They became part of the pattern rather than standing apart from it. When the seas turned toxic, they evolved enzymes. When the sunlight grew harsh, they hid in shadow. And when the world froze during ancient ice ages, they found warmth in the deep, near the vents, where the Earth's heart still whispered heat into the dark. These were not conscious choices, but they were acts of resilience nonetheless. They showed that life's secret was not victory, but persistence, the ability to remain in some form no matter how the world changed. Even when 99% of all species vanished, the remaining 1% carried everything forward. Each survivor became the root of new diversity, proof that flexibility is the closest thing to immortality that nature allows. Over time, the microscopic gave way to the visible. Cells joined together, forming colonies, then tissues, then creatures. They specialized, they shared labor, they built the first nervous systems, the first senses. The sea that had once been their cradle became a network of ecosystems, each one a lesson in coexistence. Some learned to drift, others to crawl, others to chase. Movement itself was an adaptation, the art of reaching new environments, of not being confined to what was, and still, beneath every leap of evolution, the same law held true: bend or vanish. When the first great extinctions came, when volcanoes choked the air, when the seas boiled, when the sky darkened, life retreated, adapted, and began again. It never repeated the same mistake twice. Each recovery brought new ideas, stronger shells, better lungs, more cooperative behavior. Even the catastrophes became teachers. Resilience was not the absence of suffering. It was the ability to use suffering as raw material for growth. If resilience had a shape, it would not be a wall. It would be a spiral shell, a tree branch, a wave. All things that move with pressure, not against it. The ammonite, curling in its perfect symmetry, survived for millions of years by carrying its home in a shape that balanced beauty and function. The tree, bending in the wind, resists not by defiance, but by yielding. The wave does not fight gravity, it dances with it. Nature does not cling to stability, it transforms it. From those first cells came every lineage we know: coral and fish, fern and forest, bird and mammal, and finally us, the inheritors of the same law of change. We often imagine ourselves as masters of adaptation, but in truth, we are its continuation. The same principles that guided bacteria in the deep ocean guide us still. Sense the change, accept it, reshape yourself within it. We call it learning, creativity, resilience, but it is the same story told again in a different voice. Even now, life continues its quiet improvisation. In the heat of deserts, microbes turn sunlight into sugar. In the cold of the Antarctic, moss grows beneath ice. In radioactive ruins, bacteria repair their DNA faster than radiation can destroy it. Everywhere we look, life is not resisting change. It is writing poetry with it, adapting always into new forms of balance. Resilience, then, is not a reaction. It is a philosophy written into the fabric of every living thing. A reminder that survival is not about conquering the world, but about belonging to it, moving with its tides, its temperatures, its transformations. The first breath of life was not a declaration of control. It was a whisper of acceptance. And in that whisper began the longest story the universe has ever told. the story of how being flexible enough to live means being brave enough to change. The story of life was never meant to be easy. From its first fragile beginning, it grew in a world that tested it constantly, a world of fire and flood, of heat and cold, of endless movement. But the secret of survival was never resistance. It was transformation. Every crisis became a sculptor, every disaster a lesson. The earth did not nurture life gently. It taught it through challenge, through the quiet brutality of change. After the first cells filled the oceans, the planet began to shift beneath them. Continents moved, volcanoes burst through the seafloor, pouring minerals and heat into the water. Lightning still split the skies, and comets continued to fall. Each event that might have erased life instead deepened its resilience. Bacteria learned to live in boiling vents, in acid pools, in the lightless depths of the crust. Some began to thrive on sulfur, others on iron, others still on the faint energy of chemical reactions too subtle for the naked eye to imagine. They did not wait for comfort. They became comfort within discomfort. And then came the first great catastrophe, the oxygen revolution. It began as an innovation. A group of tiny cyanobacteria learned to harvest sunlight, to draw energy from the photons that filled the shallow seas. In doing so, they released oxygen, a gas that was, at the time, deadly to most other forms of life. At first, it was a trace, a whisper in the water. Then, slowly, it grew stronger. The oceans filled with it, and the sky began to change. Iron dissolved in the seas, rusted, falling to the ocean floor as red sediment. The world turned from gray to ochre, from shadow to light. For many species, it was the end. Oxygen destroyed the chemical balance that had sustained them. They suffocated in an atmosphere that was becoming too clean, too reactive. But a very few, found a way to use it. They reshaped their metabolism, turning what was poison into power. Oxygen became fuel, and with it came the possibility of greater energy, greater motion, greater complexity. Out of catastrophe emerged vitality. Life, once small and slow, could now grow, move, and change faster than ever before. This was the pattern that would repeat for all of history: pressure, collapse, adaptation, renewal. Each disaster refined the world. Each extinction cleared the way for something stronger, more intricate, more aware. The earth was a workshop of resilience, and every crisis was its teacher. When the oxygen reached its balance, the climate shifted again. The sun dimmed slightly, continents drifted toward the poles, changing the currents of the sea. Snow began to fall, at first in high places, then farther, then everywhere. The world entered an era of deep cold, an ice age that lasted for millions of years. The oceans froze almost to the equator, and sunlight reflected off the white surface into space, making the cold even deeper. It might have been the end, a frozen silence across the globe. But even then, life endured. Beneath the ice, near the vents of heat that still pulsed from the planet's core, microbes continued to feed. Some found ways to use faint chemical gradients. Others trapped tiny bubbles of liquid water to survive in pockets of warmth. They slowed their metabolism until time itself seemed to stop. When the ice finally began to melt, they awoke as if from a long dream, unchanged but wiser. From their endurance came new forms, new possibilities. The snowball Earth, as we now call it, was not a grave. It was a chrysalis. When the world thawed, the seas teemed with invention. Multicellular life began to flourish, experimenting with shapes and strategies, soft bodies that drifted, tentacles that grasped, shells that protected. Evolution is not a straight line. It is 1,000 simultaneous improvisations, and each of them is a dialogue with the planet, a negotiation between fragility and force. Resilience is not a single event. It is the constant rewriting of that conversation. The Earth has always been a demanding teacher. When continents collided, they raised mountains that changed the wind and the rain. When volcanoes erupted, they darkened the skies for centuries. Each change, each eruption, each flood forced life to learn again. Species that could not adapt faded into fossils, and those that remained carried the lessons forward in their DNA, a record of endurance written in code. There is beauty in this harshness. Every creature alive today is an heir to that lineage of survival. The blood that carries oxygen through our bodies, the proteins that repair our cells, the instincts that make us seek warmth and shelter, all of them are ancient, tested by eons of pressure and refined by necessity. We do not simply live, we continue a pattern as old as the planet itself. To breathe is to remember. The Earth's catastrophes were not punishments, they were corrections. Too much carbon, the planet cooled. Too little oxygen, the planet grew still. Each imbalance provoked a creative answer, not from a mind, but from the quiet intelligence of life itself. Adaptation is that intelligence in motion, not conscious thought, but a wisdom older than thought, written into every molecule that has ever persisted. Sometimes resilience means invention. Sometimes it means patience. In the frozen epochs, life waited. In the fiery ages, it moved. In the dark, it learned to glow. Each form of endurance became a kind of art. The glowing jellyfish in the deep ocean are not accidents. They are memories of ancient survival. Light evolved in darkness, a testament to persistence disguised as beauty. If the universe could admire something, it might admire this, the quiet refusal of life to end. Even when the conditions seem impossible, something always finds a way. There are microbes today that feed on radiation, that live in acid lakes, that survive in space itself. They are not outliers. They are reminders of what life truly is, not delicate, but determined. To live is to adapt. To adapt is to endure. And in the grand sweep of history, adaptation does more than preserve. It transforms. The crises of the past gave rise to the diversity of the present. Every mountain, every climate, every ecosystem is built from layers of adjustment, each one a response to change. Resilience does not mean returning to what was. It means becoming what can be. That is the secret the Earth has whispered since the first lightning struck its seas. Strength is not the absence of fragility. It is its mastery. The planet continues to turn, the air to shift, the oceans to rise and fall, and life, still listening, still learning, keeps its rhythm. Every adaptation, from the cell to the forest, from the coral to the whale, is a verse in the same song. A song written in crisis, sung in survival, and passed from age to age in the gentle language of persistence. Resilience is not a single act of defiance. It is the slow, patient practice of becoming. And as the Earth continues to change, as it always will, that practice remains its most beautiful creation. Life does not always survive by movement. Sometimes the truest strength lies in stillness. Long after the oceans filled with swimming things and the skies began to pale with light, the land remained silent and bare. There were winds and stones, rivers without banks, and deserts of dust. And yet, beneath that silence, something was preparing to rise, something that would teach the world a new form of resilience. The first plants began as whispers from the sea. They were algae, simple filaments that floated with the currents, drinking sunlight through thin membranes. They had no roots, no stems, no certainty of ground beneath them. But within them was a quiet intention to reach higher, to grow toward light even when the world offered no place to stand. In time, they crept to the edges of continents, clinging to wet rock, learning how to endure the open air. They were the first to feel wind, the first to touch rain as it fell, the first to discover that survival could mean staying still. From those fragile beginnings came mosses and ferns, soft carpets that blanketed the stone. They trapped water, built soil, and changed the world. Their roots, small and uncertain, learned to dig not only for water, but for stability. In doing so, they anchored more than themselves. They anchored the future. Every forest, every field, every blade of grass is an echo of that first decision, to stay, to adapt by patience rather than by flight. Plants are not passive. They simply move on a different scale, too slow for our eyes, but no less alive. They reach, twist, sense, and communicate. A seed buried in the ground can tell which direction is up, which way the light lies. A root can feel the presence of stones, of other roots, of moisture far away. Leaves can detect the breath of an animal, the scent of danger carried on the wind. To live without motion, they developed sensitivity deeper than any muscle could give. They became the world's quiet listeners, and they learned to adapt not by escape, but by timing. When the rains fail, some seeds do not sprout. They wait years, decades, even centuries, holding the memory of life within them until the world softens again. The desert lupine, the resurrection plant, the lotus, all of them have mastered the art of stillness as a strategy. They remind us that resilience does not always mean endurance through the storm. Sometimes it means sleeping until the storm has passed. There are seeds older than civilizations that have bloomed again after 1,000 years. In their shells, time is not an enemy, but an ally. They understand that patience is not weakness, it is precision. The earth rewards those who know when to rest and when to rise. As the forests grew, adaptation took new forms. Leaves became solar panels, designed to catch light in every hue and season. Roots became explorers, mapping the unseen world beneath our feet, connecting one plant to another through vast networks of fungi. Through these underground threads, the mycorrhizal networks, trees share nutrients, warnings, and wisdom. An old tree will feed the young through its roots. A shaded sapling will receive sugar from neighbors in the sun. The forest, in its quiet way, behaves like a single organism, a community of resilience rather than competition. Even the shape of a leaf is an answer to adversity. Broad leaves capture more light and shade. Needles conserve water in cold or arid places. Waxy coatings reflect heat. Tiny hairs trap moisture. Curled edges resist the tearing of wind. Every curve and vein is a story of adaptation written in green. The beauty of a forest is not decoration, it is survival, perfected over eons. And when destruction comes, as it always does, plants are the first to return. After volcanoes erupt, after fires sweep the land, after ice retreats, mosses and grasses emerge again. They do not rebuild by force, they rebuild by presence. Bit by bit, root by root, they draw life back into the soil. They hold moisture, invite insects, call the birds, and slowly, quietly turn ruin into rebirth. They do not hurry, they trust time, and time in turn trusts them. The cycle of the seasons is nature's deepest meditation on resilience. Every year the forest dies and is reborn. Leaves fall and decay, returning their minerals to the soil that once nourished them. The tree stands bare, not defeated, but resting. And when spring comes, it begins again, not as it was, but as it must be. Resilience, in its purest form, is the ability to meet the same challenge with new growth. The tree does not fear winter because it carries spring inside its memory. Light, too, became part of this dialogue. Plants learned not only to use it, but to speak through it. When sunlight grows too harsh, they angle their leaves to protect themselves. When nights grow long, they bloom at different hours, timing their lives to the rhythms of stars. In deserts, some open their flowers only at dusk when the air cools. In jungles, vines climb toward the canopy, chasing the brief patches of gold that slip between branches. This is adaptation at its most elegant, not rebellion, but choreography, a slow, deliberate dance between the possible and the real. And when danger comes in the form of teeth or drought or flame, plants do not cry out. They change chemistry. They grow thorns. They release scents that call predators of their predators. They turn bitterness into defense, toxins into protection, fragrance into allure. Every perfume, every drop of nectar, every thorn on a rose is a story of adaptation made visible. Some plants adapt not only to survive, but to travel. Their seeds learn to float, to fly, to cling. The dandelion lifts its children on parachutes of silk. The coconut trusts the sea. The maple spins its seeds like wings. Each has found its way to say the same thing. Change will come, and I will meet it. They are travelers who never walk, voyagers who move through patience and wind. What plants teach us is a lesson far deeper than biology. They show that strength is not loud. It does not announce itself with speed or power. It whispers through persistence, through beauty that endures quietly, through the slow rebuilding of what was lost. A forest does not shout, it simply returns. When we look at a tree, we see only its surface, its bark, its leaves, its shape. But beneath the ground lies another truth. More than half its being is invisible. Its roots stretch deep and wide, searching, stabilizing, learning. If the wind tears its branches, the roots will grow stronger. If the drought lasts long, the roots will reach deeper. Resilience begins in the unseen. Even death itself is part of the plan. When a tree falls, it does not disappear. Its body becomes a bridge for new life, mushrooms, insects, moss, and seedlings. Its nutrients return to the soil, nourishing the next generation. There is no waste in nature's design, only transformation. Resilience does not deny death, it gives it meaning. In the language of plants, adaptation is poetry. Every petal is a word for survival. Every seed is a promise. Every forest is a memory of recovery. They have lived through fire, ice, drought, and time, and still they reach upward. Their secret is not defiance. It is trust in the earth, in the sun, in the endless rhythm of return. So when we speak of resilience, perhaps we should look less at the creatures that fight and more at those that wait. At the seed that sleeps through centuries, at the tree that bends and stands again, at the grass that grows through stone. They remind us that adaptation is not a reaction. It is a form of faith. Faith that light will return. Faith that change is not the end, but the path itself. Beneath the shimmering surface of the ocean lies the oldest memory of life, a vast, liquid archive of adaptation. Here, every current carries a story of survival. Every wave is a pulse of history. The sea was the first teacher of resilience, and it remains the most patient. When life first took form, it did so in water, a world without edges, where pressure and light were the only boundaries. The ocean offered both safety and challenge, protection from the harsh sky above, but endless shifts in temperature, chemistry, and motion. To live here meant to learn how to float, how to drift, how to change shape with the currents, and so life became fluid, literally and in spirit. The earliest organisms did not fight the ocean's movements. They surrendered to them. They moved with the tides, not against them, letting the rhythm of the planet decide their pace. This was the first great adaptation, harmony instead of struggle. To survive, life did not need to dominate, only to understand. Light was the next teacher. Near the surface, sunlight filtered through the waves, splitting into gold and blue. Some creatures learned to use it, tiny plankton, fragile and bright, transforming sunlight into food. They became the ocean's lungs, exhaling oxygen that would one day fill the sky. But below them, beyond the reach of light, another world was waiting, a realm of darkness that demanded different strategies. In the deep, where sunlight dies, life learned a new language. Creatures here glowed in the dark, carrying stars within their bodies. They invented bioluminescence, a soft, living light that spoke across the black water. Some used it to lure prey, others to communicate, some to vanish by matching the faint glow above. In the silence of the abyss, light became a form of thought, a way to say, "I am here," without sound. Adaptation in the deep ocean is unlike anywhere else. The pressure there is immense, thousands of times greater than at the surface. For a human, it would crush bones and metal alike. But for the creatures that live there, it is normal, even comforting. Their cells have evolved to be flexible yet unbreakable, their chemistry tuned perfectly to the weight that surrounds them. They do not resist the pressure, they become part of it. This is the essence of resilience, not denial of reality, but integration with it. Some of the strangest and most beautiful forms of life exist in that darkness. Jellyfish like glass sculptures, fish with transparent heads, shrimp that see heat instead of light. Every shape there is an answer to a question asked by the deep. How will you live when everything presses against you? And life, again and again, replies, by changing. Even the motion of the sea itself is a lesson in adaptation. Currents flow for thousands of kilometers, carrying warmth, salt, and life between continents. Fish and plankton follow them as if following invisible roads. Whales migrate across entire oceans, using sound to navigate the unseen. The sea teaches persistence through rhythm, endless movement that never exhausts itself. In its patience, the ocean mirrors the heartbeat of the planet. Near the shores, resilience takes on new forms. Here, the waves crash and retreat, reshaping everything they touch. Creatures that live between land and sea, barnacles, crabs, seaweeds, have learned to live between opposites. They are soaked by tides, dried by sun, battered by storms, and still they endure. Their strength lies not in armor, but in flexibility. The mussel's shell may seem hard, but its secret is the silk that holds it to the rock. Fibers that stretch, absorb impact, and never break. They remind us that survival is a kind of conversation between stability and surrender. Coral reefs are another testament to delicate resilience. They are built by small, fragile beings, coral polyps, who join together to create entire cities of stone. Each coral is soft, but together they build mountains under the sea. They thrive in balance, depending on microscopic algae that live within their tissues. When the sea warms, that partnership falters, the algae leave, and the coral turns pale. Yet even in this fragility, there is wisdom. Some reefs recover, others migrate, some adapt to the changing heat. They teach us that resilience sometimes means knowing when to move and when to begin anew. The tides, too, are lessons written in water. They rise and fall, drawn by the moon's patient pull. No resistance, no conflict, only endless return. Every creature in the intertidal world times its life to this rhythm. Crabs feed between tides, fish spawn with the full moon, sea turtles lay eggs when the waves are right. To live by the tides is to trust repetition, to find strength not in control, but in surrender to cycles. The ocean has also been a witness to endings, mass extinctions, shifting climates, sudden freezes, and floods. Each time it has rebalanced itself. When the air grew thick with carbon, the plankton adapted. When the temperature rose, the fish moved deeper. When acid ate its shells, new kinds of shells were born. The sea does not cling to any one form of life. It allows each to come and go, to evolve into what fits the moment. In its vastness, loss becomes transformation. And yet, for all its fluidity, the ocean remembers. Every molecule of water that touches the shore has traveled through time. It has risen as vapor, fallen as rain, frozen in glaciers, melted and returned. It has carried the breath of ancient fish, the ash of volcanoes, the sweat of explorers, the tears of new beginnings. It is the most adaptable substance on Earth because it accepts every form, solid, liquid, vapor, and remains itself through all. Water is the definition of resilience. There is a quiet philosophy written in the ocean's movements. To flow is not to yield. To change is not to lose identity. The sea remains the same sea whether it roars or rests, whether it freezes or boils. Its power lies in its openness to transformation. And perhaps that is why life still depends on it. Every breath we take, every cloud above us, every drop of blood in our veins is tied to the ocean's endurance. The salts in our bodies mirror the salts of the sea. The rhythm of our hearts echoes the waves. We are walking reminders that life's resilience was first written underwater. Even now, when we study the deep, we discover new species, creatures that live where light has never touched, where temperatures would melt or freeze any known material. They prove that the boundaries of life are not fixed. They expand as the planet changes, as if existence itself is learning through exploration. The ocean is not a single story, but a chorus. Every drop sings the same truth in a different tone. To survive, you must move with the world, not against it. To resist the tide is to drown. To float with it is to live. And in that floating, that constant transformation, life has found its calmest and most enduring strength. There came a time when stillness was no longer enough. For billions of years, life had learned to grow, to feed, to endure, to adapt without moving. But the world was expanding, oceans deepening, continents shifting, climates drifting like dreams across the planet. To survive, life would have to follow those changes, and so began one of the greatest experiments in resilience, the invention of movement. It started quietly in the soft mud of the seafloor. Tiny creatures, little more than filaments of muscle, began to twist and contract. Their bodies rippled like waves, pushing them forward through the sediment. At first, it was not a journey, just a reaction to touch, to hunger, to light. But in those small tremors lay the seed of exploration. Each movement carried a choice, however simple, toward or away. And from that choice, a universe of possibilities was born. The oceans soon filled with wanderers. Some drifted with the currents, steering only slightly, learning the contours of water. Others developed fins, paddles, or cilia, tools to swim against the flow. They did not yet know it, but they were rewriting the story of life. Movement was no longer a reflex. It was an invitation to find new spaces, to adapt to distance, to discover. In movement, life discovered time. A creature that could swim or crawl, experienced cause and effect differently. The world was no longer what surrounded it, it became something to traverse. Predators evolved to chase, prey to flee, and from that simple dance arose diversity beyond measure. Every new form of motion, a dart, a glide, a crawl, was an active adaptation. Each species became an experiment in rhythm. The jellyfish pulsed like the heart of the sea, moving by contraction and release. The trilobite crept with armored patience, reading the vibrations of the sand. The fish learned to shape the currents, to turn the ocean itself into a partner. Even in the deep, where no light reached, creatures invented movement without sight, following chemical trails, magnetic lines, and faint whispers of sound. To move was to sense, and to sense was to live more deeply. When life finally reached the edge of land, it faced a challenge greater than any before. Gravity was heavier there. Water, once a cradle, became a memory. But curiosity, that quiet drive to expand, did not fade. Fins grew stronger, bones formed within them, and soon the first amphibians dragged themselves onto mud and shore. The act was awkward, uncertain, like a child learning to walk. But it was the beginning of a new world. The air was strange, dry, filled with light unfiltered by water. Every breath burned, but still they persisted. They learned to swallow air through lungs, to shield their eggs from drying, to push their weight against the pull of the ground. Each adaptation was both a risk and a promise, the price of motion, the cost of exploration. Resilience had become migration, and Earth would never be still again. Movement, once born, spread like fire through the story of evolution. The lizards learned to leap, the birds to fly, the mammals to run. Flight itself was a miracle of adaptation, a surrender to gravity so complete that it became mastery. Wings of insects shimmered first, delicate and small. Later came feathers, long and light, built not from bone but from air. To fly was to trust the invisible. It was resilience refined into grace. Each new movement created a new world. The rivers carved by fish became highways for larger creatures. The land shaped by migrating herds turned into grasslands. The sky, once empty, filled with wings. And with every new way to move came new ways to see. The eyes of a hawk learned to follow the patterns of wind. The fins of whales learned to echo the contours of waves. The very structure of life became a map of the world's constant motion. Movement also brought memory. To migrate is to remember. The salmon that returns to its birthplace, the birds that follow the stars, the whales that cross entire oceans, all carry within them invisible compasses written in biology. They adapt not only in body, but in path. The world itself becomes part of them. Rivers, currents, magnetic lines, constellations. Resilience now meant more than surviving change. It meant learning to travel through it. But not all movement was physical. Plants, too, learned to move in their own way. Their seeds drifted on the wind. Their pollen rode the air. Their roots reached and curled beneath the soil. Even a sunflower turns its face to follow the sun, slow but sure. Adaptation always finds motion, even in silence. Life refuses stagnation, whether by wing or by whisper. And yet, the greatest secret of movement is that it is never random. It is guided by the search for balance. Every migration, every flow, every leap is a response to imbalance, to hunger, to heat, to cold, to change. Through movement, life restores itself. When the world grows harsh in one place, it softens in another, and creatures travel the space between. The earth breathes through their journeys. Movement is also how life connects. One species carries seeds to new lands. Another stirs nutrients through the soil. Even death becomes part of the motion. A fallen leaf feeding roots, a body feeding the ground. Nothing stands apart. Adaptation in its purest form is the recognition that everything moves together. And through all these countless transformations, one truth remained. Resilience is not about standing your ground. It is about knowing when to leave it, to flow, to migrate, to evolve. These are not escapes from hardship. They are the continuation of life's oldest instinct, to stay alive by becoming something new. Today, when we watch birds trace their paths across continents or fish glitter in 1,000 directions under sunlight, we are seeing the same story retold. Movement is memory. Movement is adaptation. It is life's way of saying, the world changes, and so do I. And even we, the humans who walk and build and travel, carry that same pulse. Our migrations across ice and desert, our voyages by sail and sky, are echoes of the same resilience that began in the sea. We move, not only to survive, but to seek. Curiosity, too, is a form of adaptation, the soul's way of traveling toward what it does not yet know. Because to move is to trust that there is something worth moving toward. To change is to believe that there is still a future to meet, and perhaps that is the deepest resilience of all, not just the will to endure, but the willingness to go on becoming. For a long time, the story of life seemed to be one of competition. The strong devoured the weak, the swift outran the slow, predators sharpened their teeth, and prey learned to run faster, hide deeper, grow harder shells. To survive was to struggle, or so it appeared. But beneath the noise of conflict, another story was unfolding, a quieter, older one. It was the story of cooperation, the art of survival through connection. Life had discovered a truth deeper than domination, that to thrive, it must learn to share. From the very beginning, existence was never solitary. Even the first cells that learned to breathe oxygen did not do so alone. They formed colonies, clusters of living beings that communicated through chemicals and light. They exchanged nutrients, sheltered one another from toxins, and divided labor. What one could not do, another could, and together they became something greater, the first communities of resilience. Then came a moment that changed the world forever. A simple cell absorbed another, not to consume it, but to keep it. Inside, that smaller cell continued to live, producing energy, transforming light and oxygen into fuel. Over time, they became inseparable. That small guest became the mitochondrion, the power source of every complex cell on Earth. It was the first great act of partnership, and it built the foundation for all higher life. Every animal, every plant, every human being carries within them the memory of that union. We are all collaborations of ancient cells, still working together, still whispering across the ages. Our resilience is born not from isolation, but from connection written into our very structure. Cooperation spread like a quiet revolution. Coral and algae formed alliances that built entire ecosystems. The coral provided shelter. The algae offered food through photosynthesis. Together, they constructed the reefs that became nurseries of the sea. Neither could have survived alone. Together, they shaped worlds. On land, fungi wove their threads through soil, touching roots of trees and plants, linking them in vast networks. Through those threads, the mycorrhizal web, trees began to share nutrients, warnings, and knowledge. A dying tree sent its last resources to the young. A shaded sapling received sugars from its elders. In the forest, cooperation replaced competition as the true measure of strength. The forest does not fight itself. It breathes as one organism. Even animals, long thought to be ruled by competition, revealed their cooperative nature. Ants built cities, bees organized societies, wolves hunted in teams, dolphins shared food and play. In each, intelligence expressed itself not through isolation, but through coordination. To cooperate is to trust, and trust, even in its smallest form, is a radical act of adaptation. Symbiosis, the living together of different species, became life's greatest innovation. It appeared everywhere, in forms both visible and hidden. Bacteria in our intestines help us digest food, produce vitamins, and keep us alive. In return, we provide them warmth and sustenance. The grass that feeds the cow depends on the cow to spread its seeds. The flower that offers nectar ensures its future through the bee that visits it. Every exchange, every connection is a thread in the great web of resilience. Even death is part of this cooperation. When one being falls, it nourishes the next. A fallen leaf becomes soil. A decayed body feeds the forest. There is no waste in nature's design, only transformation, only giving. Adaptation, at its heart, is generosity. Over time, cooperation shaped intelligence itself. The social species, elephants, primates, whales, evolved empathy. They learned to care for one another, to mourn, to teach. Emotions became tools of survival, guiding communities toward balance. The brain, so often praised for its logic, grew from the need to connect, to communicate, to share, to belong. Even evolution, which we once thought blind and brutal, reveals this harmony. Genes that help one individual often persist because they help others as well. Kinship, altruism, the instinct to protect, all are extensions of cooperation across generations. Nature learned that life is not a race, but a network. Each success is shared, even if we do not see it. In the ocean, schools of fish move as one body, their silver scales flashing like thought made visible. In the sky, flocks of birds weave patterns that seem choreographed, turning and rising in unison. No single leader commands them. They move by listening, each sensing the movement of its neighbor, adjusting, flowing, following. Together, they form something that no single bird or fish could be alone. A living wave, graceful and adaptive. The lesson is universal. Unity is not uniformity. Each part remains distinct, yet contributes to the whole. Resilience grows not from sameness, but from harmony among difference. The planet itself follows this principle. Oceans, air, soil, and sunlight interlocking in perfect balance. When one falters, the others compensate. That balance is what we call stability, but it is, in truth, the ongoing act of mutual adaptation. And so, from microbes to ecosystems, cooperation became evolution's greatest art. Even today, we carry it forward. Every breath we take owes itself to plants and their oxygen. Every step we walk depends on soil built by fungi and decay. Every cell in our bodies is a collaboration of billions. We are not separate from nature's web. We are one of its threads. Yet, in our age, we sometimes forget. We imagine ourselves as solitary, above, apart, in control. But the truth remains simple and ancient. Nothing endures alone. Resilience is not isolation, but interdependence. The mountain stands because of the roots of its trees. The river flows because of the clouds above it. Life holds life. That is the secret that keeps the planet breathing. If you could listen to the world closely enough, you might hear the quiet pulse of cooperation beneath everything. The trees exchanging carbon and air, the coral and fish keeping each other alive, the fungi carrying messages underfoot, the wind distributing seeds to where they are needed most. It is a soft, ceaseless music, older than speech and wiser than ambition. a song that says again and again, "Together we endure." It is the rhythm of resilience, not a heartbeat, but a harmony. Not every battle is won by movement. Not every challenge is met with strength. Sometimes the greatest act of survival is to become still, to fade from the storm until it passes, to surrender to time until the world is ready again. This is the quiet wisdom of life, that silence too can be a form of resilience. In the frozen corners of the planet, deep under blankets of snow, bears sleep through the long winter. Their hearts slow, their breath softens, their temperature drops. Inside them, entire systems change pace. Blood thickens, cells consume less, muscles wait. They are not dead, not even fully asleep, but suspended, a pause written into their biology. For months, they live in stillness, their energy drawn inward like a candle burning low. And when the thaw comes, they wake not weaker, but whole. This is hibernation, nature's most patient answer to scarcity. In deserts, where heat rules by day and frost returns by night, other creatures practice the same art. Snails seal themselves inside shells, frogs bury into mud, seeds curl beneath the sand. Time stops for them until the rains arrive. To a casual eye, they seem gone, lifeless, but they are waiting, perfectly attuned to the rhythm of the earth's breath. Resilience is not always endurance through hardship. Sometimes it is knowing when to rest. Even the smallest creatures carry this ancient wisdom. The tardigrade, a microscopic being almost invisible, can survive in boiling heat, in freezing cold, even in space itself. When the environment turns hostile, it dries itself out, curling into a crystalline state called cryptobiosis. Its metabolism halts, its water vanishes, and yet inside, it holds the potential for life, like a memory folded into silence. Years, decades later, when moisture returns, it awakens, unchanged, patient, eternal. A grain of dust that remembers being alive. There are fish in Arctic seas that freeze almost solid and then revive when the ice melts. There are plants that lie dormant for centuries until a spark of rain awakens them. Even bacteria, sealed in ancient rock or salt for millions of years, have been revived in laboratories, alive, waiting, still listening. To sleep through eternity is not to disappear. It is to believe that change will come and to be ready when it does. Silence is not emptiness. It is preparation. When a forest burns, its seeds are already waiting beneath the soil. When a drought comes, roots retreat deep into the earth, drawing on reserves gathered over years of plenty. Even in death, the forest is not gone. It is reorganizing itself below the surface, quietly planning its return. Some creatures survive not by hiding from the world, but by vanishing within it. The octopus changes color and texture, blending perfectly with rock and coral. The snow hare turns white with the season, melting into the landscape. The stick insect becomes indistinguishable from the twig it rests on. This is camouflage, the art of invisibility, the strategy of silence made visible. To survive, they do not confront danger. They dissolve into it. They remind us that power can be found not only in standing out, but in disappearing when needed. Silence is also emotional. Elephants, when they mourn, do so quietly. They touch the bones of their dead, stand in stillness, and breathe together. Their grief is not loud, yet it is profound, an act of remembrance that binds them as a family. Even in pain, life finds a way to hold itself with dignity. Resilience is not the absence of feeling. It is the strength to feel deeply and remain whole. Many birds, when the storm approaches, stop singing. They perch low and wait. Insects fold their wings, flowers close. The entire landscape enters a hush that feels almost sacred, a collective pause that says, We know this will pass. That silence is not fear, it is wisdom. It is the earth remembering itself. There are moments in evolution when silence has saved the planet. After mass extinctions, when the world grew quiet and empty, life paused, regrouped, waited for balance to return. It was in those silent ages that the next waves of creation gathered their strength. The Earth's recovery has never been loud. It has always begun in whispers, microbes blooming unseen, roots spreading in ash, breath returning to air. The calm after destruction is the womb of renewal. Some of the most resilient beings on Earth are also the most unassuming. Lichens cling to stone in the coldest deserts, surviving on light and dust. They grow at a pace so slow that centuries pass before they cover a few inches, yet they have conquered every continent, every climate. Their power lies in simplicity, a fungus and an alga living together, patient beyond measure. Their lives are so slow they seem motionless, yet they transform entire mountains over time. Stillness, it seems, can outlast fire. Silence has its own rhythm, just as life does. It contracts and expands. It protects and reveals. To wait is not to surrender. It is to trust that the world will turn again. Every creature that sleeps through winter, every seed that holds itself through drought, every glacier that waits to melt carries this trust. They know that the earth moves in cycles, and that peace comes not from resisting those cycles, but from aligning with them. Even we, though we rarely admit it, are children of this same silence. When the body is hurt, it rests. When the mind is overwhelmed, it seeks quiet. Healing, in all its forms, begins in stillness. Our own resilience depends not on constant activity, but on our ability to pause, to listen, to let time do its work. We are not separate from nature's rhythm. We are echoes of it. If resilience could speak, it might not roar. It would whisper. It would tell us that slowing down is not the same as giving up. That invisibility can be a form of grace. That silence, properly understood, is not the absence of life, but the concentration of it. In the deepest caves, fish swim without eyes. In the highest mountains, moss grows between stones where no tree can stand. In the vacuum of space, dormant spores drift between worlds, waiting for warmth. All of them are part of the same truth. Stillness is not death. It is resilience breathing in secret. The quiet ones of the world, the sleepers, the hiders, the invisible, carry the memory of survival that has lasted since the dawn of time. They remind us that sometimes the best way to live is not to fight the storm, but to wait for the calm that follows. And when that calm comes, to rise, unbroken, into the new light. At some point in the long unfolding of life, survival began to depend on more than instinct, movement, strength, endurance. They were no longer enough. The world had grown more complex, and with it, so did the creatures that lived within it. The ocean had filled with hunters and prey, the land with forests and seasons, the sky with weather and shadow. To endure such a changing world, life began to look inward, and from that reflection, intelligence was born. At first, it was nothing more than response, a flicker, a pulse, a chemical signal saying yes or no, safe or dangerous. But those signals, multiplied and refined, became the beginnings of awareness. Cells began to sense patterns, light before warmth, sound before motion, scent before food. They began to remember, and memory, however small, was revolutionary. It allowed a creature to learn, to change not only its body, but its behavior. A jellyfish can remember where it was hurt. A worm can learn which direction leads to food. Each of these is a fragment of mind, a thread in the vast tapestry of adaptability. The nervous system became the body's conversation with the world, a way to translate experience into survival. And through that conversation, consciousness began to whisper. As life became more complex, so did the challenges it faced. Predators hunted not by chance, but by strategy. Prey hid not by reflex, but by decision. Each thought, each hesitation became a new evolutionary tool, a way to adapt in real time rather than over generations. The brain was not merely an organ, it was a laboratory for resilience. In the ocean, cephalopods, octopuses, squids, cuttlefish evolved minds unlike any other. They could solve problems, open shells, mimic shapes, even play. Their intelligence was fluid, as changeable as the water they lived in. They adapted not through inheritance, but through improvisation. An octopus learns, remembers, decides, and when it changes color, it is not just camouflage, but communication. Its entire body is an instrument of thought. On land, a different kind of mind emerged, slower, steadier, built for memory across years rather than moments. Mammals developed social bonds, empathy, and recognition. Elephants remember faces for decades. Wolves coordinate their hunts through glances and gestures. Dolphins call each other by name. In these acts, we see that intelligence is not dominance, it is connection. To think is to relate, to sense patterns not only in nature, but in others. Memory became the foundation of adaptation. Through memory, the past shaped the present. Through learning, creatures began to anticipate the future. The brain became a time traveler, carrying yesterday's lessons into tomorrow's uncertainty. This ability to imagine what could be became life's greatest invention. Before tools, before language, before fire, there was imagination, the seed of every adaptation yet to come. But with awareness came fragility. To feel is to be vulnerable. Pain is not merely a warning, it is an understanding of harm. Fear is not cowardice, it is care for life. The mind, in learning to protect the body, also learned to suffer. And yet, even suffering became a form of resilience. It taught compassion, avoidance, memory, empathy. It connected one being's survival to another's well-being. Intelligence was not only a gift, it was a responsibility. The first primates looked up at the trees and sky with curiosity. They learned tools, languages of gesture and sound, social structures of care. In cooperation, they found safety. In creativity, they found expansion. Each generation added to the inheritance of the mind. The forest itself seemed to grow consciousness, not in a single creature, but in the network of learning that bound them all together. From this lineage, eventually, came us, humans, the ones who could ask not only how to survive, but why. We carry within us the entire history of life's attempts at understanding itself. The chemical senses of bacteria became our nerves. The awareness of light became our vision. The curiosity of cephalopods became our imagination. The memory of the elephant became our storytelling. We are not separate from evolution's experiment in intelligence. We are its continuation. Our minds, like the first cells, adapt constantly. Every thought reshapes its own pathways. Every experience rewires its circuits. We are built to learn, to forget, to change again. This flexibility, neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to remake itself, is the modern echo of life's first adaptability. Even in trauma, even in loss, the brain seeks new paths, new ways to understand, new ways to hope. And yet, our intelligence carries its own paradox. The same awareness that allows us to create can also destroy. We have learned to control fire, to split atoms, to alter genes. We can reshape entire ecosystems, sometimes gently, sometimes not. Our power has outpaced our patience. But even this imbalance is part of life's learning process, for in recognizing our own fragility, we may rediscover the same lesson that bacteria, trees, and whales already know. Survival is cooperation, not conquest. The fragile intelligence of life is not measured by logic or technology. It is measured by empathy, the ability to feel beyond oneself, a dolphin calling to a friend across the sea, a mother bird shielding her chicks, a human helping another through grief. These are all acts of adaptation. They are reminders that thinking is not enough. To be truly resilient, one must care. The future of intelligence may not belong to dominance at all. Perhaps it will belong to balance, to awareness that sustains rather than consumes, to a kind of consciousness that listens as much as it acts. Even now, forests communicate, mycelium networks share, whales exchange songs across oceans. The earth itself seems to be learning how to think as one. If evolution had a voice, perhaps it would whisper, "The mind is not your escape from nature. It is nature learning to see itself." In the quiet depths of thought, in memory, in emotion, in imagination, life has found a way to endure not through muscle, but through meaning. It adapts by understanding. It survives by empathy. It grows by remembering what it once was. And maybe this is the most delicate, most beautiful resilience of all, that the same mind that fears change is also the one capable of imagining how to live through it. Intelligence is not a weapon. It is a light, fragile, flickering, but endless in its reach. It allows us to look at the chaos of existence and say softly but clearly, "I will find a way." The story of human resilience is the story of remembering what life itself has always known, that change is inevitable and survival is not resistance, but adaptation. From the moment the first humans stood beneath an unfamiliar sky, they have carried the ancient wisdom of every creature before them, the ability to bend without breaking, to lose and still begin again. We were not the strongest beings on Earth. We had no claws, no thick fur, no armor of shell or scale, but we had hands that could shape, minds that could imagine, and hearts that could remember. And in that fragile combination, something powerful began, the art of endurance through creation. The first humans faced fire and ice, drought and flood. They walked across continents they did not yet understand, following the herds, the stars, the whisper of rivers. Each new environment demanded something different, a new tool, a new shelter, a new rhythm of life. In adapting, they became inventors. In learning to cooperate, they became communities. They built not only homes, but stories, and those stories became maps of survival. When the cold deepened, they learned to shape warmth. When the dark stretched longer, they painted light onto stone. Caves became archives of courage, and every mark left on the wall said the same thing: "We are still here." The fire they built was not just heat, it was memory. It was continuity against the long night. As the world changed, so did humanity. Languages formed like rivers branching from a common source, carrying knowledge and song. Villages became cities. Tradition became technology. Each adaptation was not a rejection of nature, but a reflection of it, a mirror of the same creativity that made coral grow and forests renew. We adapted through imagination, but adaptation for humans was never purely physical. It became emotional, psychological, spiritual. We learned not only to survive hardship, but to find meaning within it. Grief gave birth to ritual. Fear gave birth to faith. Loneliness gave birth to art. Through pain, humanity learned to express, to transform what could destroy into what could inspire. That, perhaps, is our most distinct form of resilience. When droughts came, we built wells. When sickness came, we built knowledge. When chaos came, we built culture, songs to steady the heart, myths to give shape to the unseen. The act of telling a story became a form of survival. To speak of something is to endure it twice, once in pain, once in understanding. Even the modern world, with all its complexity, is a continuation of this ancient instinct. The same creativity that once painted mammoths on cave walls now builds satellites, algorithms, and cities that glow like constellations. We adapt still to technology, to noise, to speed, to uncertainty. Sometimes the challenge is no longer nature, but our own inventions. Yet the principle remains, the ability to change without losing what makes us human. Resilience in people often looks small from the outside. It is the farmer who plants again after the storm, the mother who carries her child through war, the teacher who continues to light minds in the ruins of a school, the doctor who treats patients in the midst of disaster, the refugee who sings the songs of a lost homeland to keep it alive. Each of these moments is a quiet defiance, not of fate, but of despair. Human adaptation has never been purely survival. It has always carried compassion. In every era of suffering, there have been hands reaching toward others, building shelters, sharing food, offering hope. Our greatest strength is not independence, but empathy, the same cooperative spirit that moves through forests and oceans. We endure together. Even our bodies remember resilience. Skin heals, bones mend, the brain rewires after trauma. The heart, though scarred, continues to beat with new rhythm. Our biology itself is a hymn to recovery. And when recovery is not possible, we adapt through acceptance, through peace. There is grace in surrender too. Across centuries, humanity has faced its own extinctions, plagues, wars, collapses, dark ages, and each time it has found a way to rebuild. Ruins become foundations. Ash becomes soil. Every civilization carries within it the memory of another's fall and the quiet conviction that renewal is possible. That is the inheritance of the species, not perfection, but perseverance. We have also learned resilience in less visible ways. Emotional adaptation, the ability to feel pain and still love, may be our most remarkable survival skill. To forgive, to hope, to dream again after loss, these are not weaknesses. They are proofs of evolution. The human spirit is a continuation of nature's oldest law. Life must continue even when it cannot be the same. Our resilience extends beyond the personal. Cultures adapt like ecosystems, shedding old habits, growing new forms. Languages evolve, carrying echoes of the past into modern breath. Art changes, but its pulse remains, to remind, to heal, to connect. When societies fall, the stories remain, and from them, new worlds are born. Memory, not stone, is the true architecture of humanity. Even now, we are adapting to forces we do not yet understand. Climate, technology, the rhythm of a planet in flux. We build new ways to live with less, to share more, to think globally while acting locally. Some of our changes come too late, some too early, but the instinct remains to adjust, to evolve, to survive with meaning. Perhaps resilience, in its highest form, is not just the ability to endure, but the willingness to change our definition of strength. Once, it meant conquering. Now, it may mean listening. Once, it meant mastering the earth. Now, it may mean learning again how to belong to it. If you look at the long arc of human history, you see a pattern, not of domination, but of rebalancing. We fall, we rise, we rebuild differently. Every challenge teaches humility, and humility itself becomes an adaptation. It keeps us open to learning, to caring, to trying again. In the quiet moments between crises, you can almost feel it, that soft pulse that connects us to every creature that has ever lived, the bacteria that learned to share, the tree that bends with the wind, the whale that sings across miles of sea. We are made of the same endurance. We are echoes of the same will to continue. Human resilience is not separate from the planets. It is the planet finding new ways to know itself through us. When we build, when we heal, when we forgive, the earth adapts through our hands and hearts. We are not its masters. We are its continuation. And perhaps that is what adaptation truly means for us now, not to conquer the world, but to care for it as we would for our own body, to see survival not as isolation, but as harmony, to understand that resilience is not the end of suffering, but the transformation of it into wisdom. We are not perfect. We are still learning, but every time humanity survives, every time it rebuilds, every time it chooses kindness over cruelty, it proves that resilience is not a miracle. It is our nature. The future of life will not arrive with noise, but with quiet transformation. It will not be a single event, but a continuous unfolding, a long conversation between what has been and what might be. Life, as it always has, will change not by force, but by patience. And though we cannot predict its next shape, we can feel the pattern that has guided it for billions of years. The will to adapt, to endure, to grow gentler and wiser with time. Already the earth is changing. The air warms, the seas rise, the seasons shift like restless sleepers. Forests migrate northward, corals search for cooler waters, animals alter their paths through ancient lands. In every corner of the planet, adaptation is underway. Some changes are painful, some miraculous, some invisible, but all are expressions of life's oldest instinct, to continue even when the world itself transforms. We often imagine the future as something distant, a horizon we will never reach. But the truth is that the future is already here, quietly taking shape in the small choices of the present, in every new seed planted, in every clean river restored, in every human who learns to listen to the rhythm of nature again. The next chapter of life is not being written in laboratories or cities alone. It is being written in the soil, in the wind, in the space between breath and awareness. Humanity stands now at a turning point, not as rulers of the planet, but as participants in its next evolution. We have created tools powerful enough to alter climates, genomes, and ecosystems. And yet the true challenge is not how much we can change, but how wisely we can change. For the first time, life itself has become conscious of its own adaptability. We can now guide evolution, but we must remember that every decision ripples across the fabric of existence. To adapt wisely is to adapt humbly. The future will belong to those who remember balance. Technologies will grow, yes, but so will our need for restraint, empathy, and care. Artificial intelligence, synthetic life, interplanetary travel, these are not ends in themselves, but reflections of a deeper desire, the search for continuity, for a way to keep life expanding beyond every boundary. Even among machines, we are teaching evolution's oldest lesson: to learn, to adjust, to coexist. If life spreads to other worlds, it will carry with it the same message that Earth has, whispered since its first dawn: change gently or not at all. Perhaps one day, humanity will look back at Earth as its first teacher, the place where it learned how to survive and then how to care. The place where strength became kindness and intelligence became understanding. Maybe the true measure of evolution will not be speed or power or control, but the capacity for harmony, the ability to grow without harm, the art of coexistence made conscious. Even now, the future is experimenting with new forms of resilience. Plants are learning to thrive in saltwater. Animals are adjusting to cities, finding food in the glow of streetlights. Microbes evolve to digest plastic, healing what we have broken. And within human hearts, compassion grows, an emotional adaptation as vital as any physical one. It is not perfection we are moving toward, but renewal, a slower, wiser kind of progress. In laboratories, scientists edit genes, not to dominate life, but to restore it. They dream of reviving lost species, of protecting those still here, of cultivating food in barren soils. They study how ecosystems heal, how the smallest organisms stabilize entire climates. The deeper we look into nature, the more we realize that technology and life need not be opposites. They can be partners. Innovation, guided by empathy, can become a new form of evolution. And yet, even with all our advancements, the greatest adaptation will remain inner, not outer. It will be the rediscovery of patience in an age of speed, the cultivation of calm in a world of noise, the willingness to feel, to pause, to protect. These quiet human traits, compassion, curiosity, care, are not relics of the past. They are the future of resilience. The earth itself will go on evolving long after us. Mountains will rise and crumble. Seas will widen and retreat. Continents will drift. Stars will burn out. And new worlds will form. Somewhere, life will continue, perhaps not as we know it, but carrying within it the same essence that moved through every leaf, every animal, every heartbeat since time began. Adaptation is eternal. Maybe one day intelligence will no longer be confined to flesh or circuits. Maybe it will exist as consciousness itself, a vast, interconnected awareness spread across ecosystems, planets, and stars. In that future, humanity may be only one voice among many in a great choir of living systems. And that will not be a loss. It will be a return to the unity that began in the first cell when one being learned to live within another. The resilience of life is not about survival alone. It is about continuity through transformation, about remembering that even as forms change, the essence remains, a pulse, a rhythm, a quiet determination to exist. The same pulse that once beat in the ocean's first bacteria still beats within you. It is older than memory and younger than tomorrow. So the future of life will not be a battle, but a collaboration between nature and mind, between technology and empathy, between what was and what can be. The future will be built not only by hands, but by awareness, not only by invention, but by care. If you look at the world from far above, from the height of clouds or the orbit of the moon, you see that it has always been this way. The earth turns slowly, patient, and kind. Clouds form and dissolve. Oceans move in rhythm. Forests breathe, release, and renew. And through it all, life continues, adapting in silence. Each generation learns something new about balance, about belonging, about what it means to be alive. Maybe that is the final lesson of adaptation, that we do not survive by changing the world, but by learning how to live within it, by seeing ourselves not as separate, but as part of the same unfolding, by understanding that resilience is not defiance of change, it is the graceful acceptance of it. The story of life will never end. It will only change its rhythm, its form, its song. And if we listen carefully, we can already hear the future humming softly in the wind, the next verse of an endless melody written by time itself. The earth breathes, life endures, and the universe continues to teach us the same truth it has whispered since the beginning. To exist is to adapt, and to adapt is to live forever.